Welcome to this first session of the first module, which takes a look at some of the opportunities under Vietnam's new FTAs for the cooperative sector. It looks at the 5 FTAs and it goes through each individual one, looking at the market size, as well as which are the certain sectors where there is potential in exports. My name is Paul Baker and I'm looking forward to taking you through the module.
This session provides an overview of Vietnam's exports, and it focuses on agricultural exports, which are of most interest to the cooperative sector. What we will do in this section is provide a brief introduction to the different free trade agreements that are novel and quite comprehensive in nature. We will be looking at the different member states, the market size, and the untapped export opportunities that exist under 5 selected free trade agreements. It's important to note that Vietnam has been on a trajectory of negotiating many new trade agreements to improve its market access overseas. Since 2015, Vietnam has concluded a series of major FTAs with very large economic blocs. The process of negotiating FTAs or new market access agreements has not stopped, and it will continue in the future. At the moment, Vietnam is negotiating a free trade agreement with the European Free Trade Area. It is also negotiating an agreement with Canada under the umbrella of ASEAN and a bilateral agreement with the United Arab Emirates. This is a map showcasing the countries that are covered by different agreements, particularly these 5 new agreements that we will be focusing on during this course. These 5 agreements cover some of the major economies and a substantial portion of the world. These agreements are the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership (CPTPP), the Agreement with the European Union, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, the Agreement with the United Kingdom, and the Eurasian Economic Union of Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. We will be exploring each of these agreements during this session. This new generation of trade agreements provides many benefits to exporters from Vietnam. First of all, through the tariff reduction channel. The fact is that goods being exported to other markets do not face the same tariff restrictions that they would face without FTAs. Also, there is the removal of non-tariff measures. So, these are the regulatory standards or technical requirements that differ across countries. That regulatory alignment actually enables trade and makes it much easier to trade between countries. These trade agreements also strengthen institutional reforms as well as better governance, and they also create a more competitive environment in which businesses in Vietnam and the FTA partners can thrive. They also facilitate domestic producers from being able to source more easily different and better quality materials for their production, but also technology and knowledge. Finally, it enables businesses to participate more fully in global production networks by eliminating many of the restrictions that exist in international trade. Starting with the CPTPP, this is a major agreement with many different significant partners in the mix. It represents a negotiating bloc of 500 million consumers, representing 13.5% of global GDP, which amounts to roughly $11.5 trillion. Most recently, the United Kingdom has acceded to the CPTPP, which would now make the bloc's value estimated at around $15 trillion. Members of the CPTPP include New Zealand, Mexico, Japan, Canada, Australia, Singapore, Vietnam of course, Peru, Malaysia, Chile and Brunei. In terms of the relationship that Vietnam has had with these trade partners over time, we can see that there has been a gradual increase in trade. exports actually rose from around $26 billion in 2012 to $46 billion in 2021. Imports have also grown at approximately the same value. Overall, Vietnam has maintained a slight positive trade balance with the CPTPP, which reached $400 million in 2021. The preferential access that the CPTPP provides Vietnam is going to provide significant opportunities to potentially double its exports by $30 billion. Among the CPTPP countries, Japan has the untapped export potential for Vietnam at $10 billion, followed by Malaysia at $5 billion, Mexico at $4.5 billion, and Canada at around $4 billion. These countries really offer many opportunities for Vietnam to increase its exports under the CPTPP. The next agreement is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, the RCEP. The RCEP negotiations were launched in 2012 and concluded in 2020. It entered into force with 10 different member countries in 2022, and it has taken some time for different countries to implement the agreement. So, Korea, Asia implemented in 2022, while Indonesia and Philippines started implementation in 2023. It is a significant trading bloc with overall GDP representing 30% of global economic output, and it covers a population of 2.3 billion people. And of course, significant members of RCEP include Australia, China, Japan, as well as New Zealand. Trade between Vietnam and RCEP countries has experienced growth since 2012. And Vietnam's imports have also been rising relatively fast and actually at a faster pace than exports. Vietnam exports more than doubled between 2012 and 2021 to reach $127 billion. Imports increased from around $78 billion to nearly $236 billion. The trade deficit with the RCEP countries has been increasing over time, and it's risen from $20 billion in 2012 to nearly $70 billion in 2021. Market access preferences under RCEP will allow Vietnam to explore an untapped export potential, which is estimated to be as much as $103 billion according to the ITC export potential map. The top RCEP markets with high unrealized export potential include China at $59 billion, the Republic of Korea at $11 billion, Japan at $10 billion, and Malaysia at $5 billion. Some of the most significant export potential products include rice, shrimp, fish, and coffee, all products of great interest to the cooperative sector. The third agreement we are looking at is the European Union-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. It provides Vietnam with preferential access to a market valued at around $17 trillion and a population of around 448 million people. It was concluded in 2015 and took some time before its signature in 2019. And it came into force in August of 2020. Trade between the European Union and Vietnam has also grown over time, and it reached a new height in 2021 following the implementation of the EVFTA. Vietnam's exports rose from around $15 billion in 2012 to around $36 billion in 2021. Imports also more than doubled from $7.9 billion to $16 billion over the same period. But that has meant that Vietnam has maintained a trade balance with the EU estimated at $20 billion in 2021. The next agreement is the UK-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. It is a bilateral agreement. So, all the other agreements included more than one country, whereas this one includes only one country in the agreement. And it gives access to the UK market, which is valued at around $3 trillion in terms of GDP with a population of about 67 million people. The negotiations were completed at the end of 2020 and the agreement came into effect in May 2021. Trade between the UK and Vietnam has also experienced an upward trajectory over the last 10 years. And Vietnam's exports are rising at a much faster pace than imports from the UK. Exports rose from around $3 billion in 2012 to almost $6 billion in 2021. Imports, on the other hand, have remained relatively stable at around $500 to $800 million a year over that period. And so, Vietnam enjoys a very strong and healthy trade surplus, which was estimated at around $5 billion in 2021. The market access preferences under the UK VFTA to explore the large untapped export potential of $4 billion to the UK market. While the majority of untapped potentials are for the manufacturing sector, some of the top products with high export potential are of interest for cooperatives and include frozen shrimps and fish fillets, which represent $48 million of untapped potential, and wooden products, which represent $310 million worth of potential. The Eurasian Economic Union Vietnam FTA is the last FTA we will look at. It provides Vietnam with preferential access to the Eurasian Economic Union. That's a market that represents 182 million people and a combined GDP of $2.5 trillion. It was signed in 2015, and it officially came into force 1 year later. Trade with partners of the EAU has increased over the last decade. Vietnam's exports rose from about $2 billion in 2012 to close to $4 billion in 2021. Imports also increased from around $1 billion in 2012 to $2.5 billion in 2021. Vietnam has enjoyed this positive trade balance, which is estimated to have reached around $1.2 billion in 2021. Again, according to International Trade Center's export potential tool, there is around $2.9 billion worth of untapped potential for Vietnamese exports to the EAU. Russia is estimated to hold 80% of that untapped export potential, and that amounts to $2.3 billion. While again manufactured products account for a large share of Vietnam's export potential to the EAU, there are also untapped potentials for cooperatives exports, such as for cashew nuts for $20 million, shrimps and prawns for $46 million, extract for $23 million, and fruits for $40 million. Thank you very much for listening to the first module, and we look forward to having you join us in the second module.